Hi, and welcome to Hannah's Writers podcast. My name's Charlotte, and I work as a Year 2 teacher in a primary school in London. If you haven't heard any podcasts from Hannah's Writers before, then have a listen on their YouTube and Spotify channels. You can search for them on both websites, and you can start listening to the podcasts that they have available. As the month of April is known as National Poetry Month, in this podcast I'm going to talk about why do we write poetry? What is a poem? That's one of the first questions that people ask because some people get it and some people don't. So I guess one way of answering this question is to say that a poem is like a short story. Usually stories are written in prose. They have full sentences, they have sentence structures, they have lots of description, and they include different types of writing techniques. And that might be metaphors, maybe similes, some speech in there, and so on and so on. And all of these things are what helps the readers to kind of bring to life what they're reading, and it helps them to visualize what the author was writing or what the author has written. Poems are written in a different way from a short story. They they do use writing techniques. For example, there are poems that have rhyming words, such as this following poem, which was written by Eve Merriam, and it showcases lots of rhyming pairs. And every two pairs of sentences, the word at the end of each sentence sounds similar to each other. So the first two lines, the word at the end sounds similar. Then the next two, the word at the end sounds similar. Then the next two, and so on and so on. So this is called the rhyming pairs, and you find it very often in most poems. It's kind of one of the first types of poetry that you see or you recognize or you hear, or some people just learn how to use them and to make them. So this one is called Catch a Little Rhyme, and it goes like this. Once upon a time, I caught a little rhyme. I set it on the floor, but it ran right out the door. I chased it on my bicycle, but it melted to an icicle. I scooped it up in my hat, but it turned into a cat, and I caught it by the tail, but it stretched into a whale. I followed it in a boat, but it changed into a goat. And when I fed it tin and paper, it became a tall skyscraper. Then it grew into a kite and flew far out of sight. Now, this is only one example of a poem and one example of the structure, which is the rhyming pair. In fact, there are many other types of poems and lots of other different poems and lots of other writing styles that are used to create them. And there's just so many. There's lots of different styles, different writings, different structures. Just to name a few, there are limerick poems and sonnets as well. There are also epic poems, if you've ever read one of those before. Ballads, of course, is a good one. Haikus, and so on and so on. The list goes on and on. So my question was, why do we write poems? Well, poems are one of the features, or is one of a way of a kind of creative way, where we can write our thoughts and feelings, and we write it in such a way that it sounds different to maybe a novel or maybe a long story. So I would say that poems allow us to share our thoughts and feelings and ideas as well with other people, and it's just written in a different way to how a story is written. These types of poems, or all kinds of poems, they allow us to express ourselves, and it makes it different and it makes it unique. And it doesn't have to be a very long thing. Um, the sentences don't have to be long and descriptive. You can have some description in your poems, of course, but they don't have to be as long winded with a full sentence structure. So instead of writing long sentences, like for example, some people they might just find that boring. Um, some people, instead of thinking about writing long sentences, they grasp language in a different way. They have a grasp of poetry. They understand poems. They understand poetry. They understand the rhythm and the rhyme that poems have. So poems are very much a piece that kind of wants to be heard. And it's because of the words that are used in it, and it's the way of the rhythm of the words. And it allows us to talk in a way where we can rhyme the words together if we wanted to. We write them with each other, and each word follows on. And then we can sound things out as well. Like onomatopoeia is a very good way of making things sound as you hear them, like boom, clap, burst, snap. Yeah, and it's quite a nice way of speaking. So if you had lots of a poem that was basically onomatopoeic words, yeah, some people might really like that and enjoy it. So when you write a poem, when people write their poems, they write it for a purpose of sharing it with others and being able to make a nice rhythm out of it or make a nice sound out of it. And it's something that, yeah, as I said, it wants to be heard. If you have, for example, a favorite rapper, so just take a moment to think about who your favorite rapper is on the radio or who a famous singer that can rap. And they're able to speak very quickly. They can just reel off as many lyrics as they want. And they're able to do it in a musical fashion, and they can follow the beat to the music, and they can also rhyme their words. So usually what they're saying makes sense in that moment in time when they're rapping. And they're talking about something, but they're not making it a long, you know, for example, you could say like John went to the park. He wore long green trousers and a white t-shirt with a blue baseball hat. He went to put on his shoes and he tied them up, made knots in the shoelaces before he left the house, and so on and so on. You gotta get what I mean. So that kind of sentence writing is more prose. It's more novel writing, more short story writing. For poetry, it's very quick, it's very fast. So it's like John went to the park. He rode on his bike. It got very dark. Then they said goodnight. Something very quick and very easy. And it tells a little story. John went to the park, then it got dark, he rode his bike, and then he went home to say goodnight. Literally, didn't have to tell you any details about him putting on his shoes or how he left the house or how he walked through the streets and saw the beautiful sunsets or none of that. It just very quick, four lines, but it still told you a very quick story. And it was a very nice story, and the endings rhymed. Singers and singer-songwriters are amazing poets in this regard. So in the past, bards, for example, would record events, but they wouldn't write them down in long sentences. They would think about how to sing a song about it, and then they'd write a ballad about it. And then, if they had a chance, they would perform that ballad, they would perform their song or their poem, either one, and they would hold a show to tell people about it. Maybe they'd have actors and actresses acting out what they were singing or acting out what they were writing or what they were speaking about. And then they'd read their poem aloud, they'd say them aloud, and they'd read it or they remember it and they'd say it in an entertaining way. Sometimes if they were good singers, they would just sing the song, and then people would stop to listen and learn about kind of different important events that took place. So a bard's main purpose was to find out events that were happening around them and then sing about them, write a story about them, or a short song, sorry, write a short song about them, and then sing it to the people. So people could then come and listen and be entertained, and they learn as well while they were having a whole performance in the whole show. Because remember, in the past, there wasn't really a standard way of writing, or there wasn't really a standard way of how to record events. So people were still trying to work out what they could do to record events. How could they remember things? And one of the best ways of remembering things is through a song. And so bards and people who sang, like jesters or people in that kind of theatre, musical, showcasing, those people in those kind of jobs, and it was their job to learn about an event and then share it with the people who were living there. And they did it in a fun way. They sang a song about it, and then people would then sing the song and kind of remember what had happened. So the song would help them to know, oh, this is what happened at this time. Sometimes these songs would be classed as long poems because they would write really long poems about it, or an epic poem. There are a few out in the moment, like Beowulf, I think, is an epic poem. And those kind of long, sort of, if you've maybe there's a poem about Hercules, or maybe there's a poem about Alexander the Great. Yeah, and that would be an epic poem, or I'm sure there would be a long poem about each of these kind of figures as well. So they always told the amazing things. They always told the feats of achievements that the people that they class as heroes at that time and what they went through. And if it wasn't a hero, it'd be a warrior or fighter or someone who stood up for someone else, like the good people. And then they would sing their songs about it. And also, if there were any villains or people that people were not happy with, they would sing a song about them, or they would tell of these terrible things that they've done because they're the villain. So then they'd make the show about them being the mean person, and then they'd make the show about the hero where, everything gets better. Another thing about the poems is that they would use different literary components. So just as novels use long descriptive sentences, poem use things like similes and metaphors. They might have some alliteration, onomatopoeia as well, as I mentioned earlier on, and so on and so on. Rhyming pairs for sure, or rhyming couplets, iambic pentameter. Sorry, I will say it right. Iambic pentameter, and so on and so on. And they would use these different literary components in their writing. And this was to help the listener understand the poem and also bring the poem to life. Remember, they're trying to showcase for the people, they're trying to bring a performance to them. So then the poet would use different imagery, different sounds, different words, different rhymes, and they get the listeners to really enjoy the story and also remember the story. I think that, in my opinion, actually, people write poems because they're fun. They just like the poetry, they like the poems, and they want to make something that people want to read. The poem is telling the reader what the author wants them to know, and the author is trying to catch a rhythm, catch a rhyme, maybe even catch a lyric, like the singer-songwriters. And it's a fun thing. It's really fun because once you get into it and you've written a lovely little poem, you can then sing it and tell it and over again. And it's not, you don't have to make an epic tale. You don't have to do like a huge poem, a huge long novel like type poem. You can do a short and quick one, or you can do a medium-sized one. But either way, the poem is there, and it will help tell the reader what the story's about and why. So that's all for this podcast, and I hope that if you have enjoyed listening to it, then I would suggest that you subscribe to Hanaz Writers. They have a YouTube and Spotify channel. And if you're interested in becoming a published author, then visit Hanaz Writers' website and sign up. Thank you very much for listening, and until next time, bye!
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and share. It really helps us out and keeps the content coming. Want to rock some awesome merch? Check out our online store, TikTok shop, or eBay page for exclusive Hanaz Writers gear. Do not forget to stay connected. Links to our social profiles can be found down below in the description. Got a brilliant idea you'd love to publish? We'd love to hear from you. Email us or visit our website at https://hanazwriters.org for all the details on how to get started. Thanks for watching and supporting Hanaz Writers. We hope to see you again soon.